Hey, welcome to Encounter Grace, everybody. My name is Jason McKnight, and I got the inimitable Ben Hendricks. You know, I always use that one for you.
Oh. Is that the snowman one or the Jurassic T-Rex one?
That's the snowman one, the abominable snowman.
Yeah.
We're coming now. Do you watch? So here we are after Christmas, coming into the new year. But do your kids watch the abominable snowman, the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer specials? Do you even know what I'm talking about?
I do. So we tried the Rudolph one, the little claymation one.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, my daughter looked right at it, watched 5 minutes of it and was like, "Don't like this one, Daddy." And I was like, "Well, we tried." It's
always next year.
Yeah, she's uncultured. You know, that's what it is. So we're trying our best. I mean, I was just trying to get to the Island of Misfit Toys, like.
That I did not like.
It's just, oh, really?
I never liked that part.
You don't like the guy who rides the ostrich? Like, childhood was built on that.
Ben, what is the ostrich you've been riding?
Yeah, what's the ostrich in your life?
Well, here we are. We're kind of starting off the new year, ending the old year, starting the new year, and thinking together. As we do, we thought we'd take an episode to sort of reorient and think about how we all want to matter. We all want to contribute something to the goodness around us and leave people near us anyway, leave them better off. Like, we don't want to be a burden on everyone around us. We also want to experience life in its fullness. The more we could do life with less drama, how's that for bad syntax? The more we could do life with less drama or unnecessary dead ends or ditches in how we do things, I think that's a better life. And at the end of the year, it's kind of a good time to start thinking about that stuff. And I'm not just thinking big stuff. I'm also thinking small stuff. Like, you know, nobody wants to drive a car that's always breaking down. Couldn't we help? We don't want to live in a marriage. Now, this is the big stuff that's always bickering and frustrating. We don't want to work in a job for decades that we hate. So the good news is, as we start the new year, I don't think it takes much to have confidence in the car you're driving, but it takes something. I don't think it takes much to have a marriage that isn't frustrating but is life-giving, but it does take some attention. And you don't have to endure a soul-crushing workplace, but you do have to do something about it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to think together of how can we, in 2025, have a life with less stress, fewer disasters, more meaning, more flourishing, because that's within reach of all of us with a few steps and adjustments along the way. And I'm going to bring up a word that maybe gets some bad PR, but it's actually a word that leads to freedom. And it's the word discipline.
Okay.
It's close to discipleship, so we all like that word.
Sure, that one is good. Yeah.
We know that's a good word, but actually, a life of discipline, which is very close to a life of discipleship. It's the same thing in a different way, but we're going to talk about that today. What does a life of discipline look like?
Okay. Yeah.
Are you up for that, Ben?
Yeah. I mean, I've even heard of that word a couple times. I've been disciplined many times.
Well, and that's where we all have the bad connotation.
So I'm just curious, like, yeah, just so that we're all on the same page. I mean, what is discipline? Like, how would you define that? I don't want to be, thinking one thing and then you're thinking of another. Yeah, I think of paddles. What do you think of?
Well, I tell you what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean, like, a life of discipline does not mean that we're a bunch of dour, Teutonic-looking robots walking around carrying out a plan no matter what with no joy. Like, that's not what we're talking about. What we are going to talk about is what discipline really is. And we're going to spend a little time explaining it and unfolding it in a definition of it.
Okay.
And then we're going to apply it in a bunch of different ways. And we'll probably riff back and forth there because I find you to be, as funny as you are, I find you to have a lot of discipline in your life. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Yes.
And that's a good thing. And so what does it look like in several different areas? And then at the end, after we define and describe it and then unpack it in several areas to start us off in 2025, then we'll just talk right at the end about, what are the options if you don't?
Yeah.
And I'm going to share a little story from my life. You could probably share a story from your life. Maybe I should make you share it as if it's your story. But
okay.
Anyway, so I think a life of discipline, or what discipline means in its positive and life-giving sense. So what we are not talking about is when a parent disciplines a child, which is just another synonym for when a parent punishes a child. That's what we think. So get that out of our minds right now. What we're talking about is what enables an athlete to make it to the highest level of their game. It's discipline that gets there, or what enables an academic to get the highest level of their game. No one just coasts into it. Or what enables a musician, to play, wherever you want, stadiums filled or Carnegie Hall or whatever it is you do. When we think about discipline, not just in achieving the highest goals, although we see that as a positive, but also in our regular life. Here's what I think discipline is. It's a pathway and it's guardrails. Discipline is the pathway for our actions that lead to fruit in life, and it's the guardrails on our lifestyle that protect us from the ditches and the cliffs that are right there. Socrates famously said, an unexamined life is not worth living. So I think we should adjust it to say at the beginning of 2025, an undisciplined life is not worth living. And I really believe that. Why? Because it's frustrating. It's messy in the wrong way. It's filled with dead ends and wrong turns and potholes and cliffs and ditches. It's the car that always breaks down because you never change the oil. I mean, the discipline is changing the oil and then your car lasts longer. My stepdad used to say, a clean car runs better.
Yeah.
And I think it's true. As I started out driving with my own cars and I didn't keep them clean, they didn't seem to do well. Well, I think it's because someone who keeps their car clean is probably also doing the oil change, the 30,000 mile checkups and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, in the same vein, I know you'll end up getting here. It's like a lot of us have a mindset of these things, but there's a big difference between knowing you should do it and actually doing it, right? Again, whatever it is, like you quoted Socrates, I'll quote the next great philosopher, Kobe Bryant, right? Who said, mindset without discipline is useless. Like having that mindset of going, I know I should shoot the ball that many times. I know I should get to practice early. But the guy who actually does it is the one who makes all the difference. Yeah. And so I love this. I mean, as a pathway and as a guardrail.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so glad you quoted Kobe.
Yeah. I mean,
mindset without the discipline. I mean, that is exactly it. And that's what we all have. We all have the right thoughts. But you know what thought did? I'm not going to finish that. There's a swear word in it. My mom said it to me one night when I was home way after curfew. And I said, but I thought I called, which was an LIE. She shocked me. She said, you know what thought did? You can call me later and I'll tell you the other half of the thing, but I'm not recording it.
We'll put that under a paywall, right?
Yeah. That's the paywall. All right. An undisciplined life is not worth living. So what is discipline then? If it's pathway and guardrails, great. Here's what I think a working definition or a helpful thing. And again, what we're doing on a podcast is we're helping thinking Christians think clearly. So we're not going to walk with you for the rest of your life, obviously, but if we can give you a few handles to grow with and think clearly about things. And I think when we consider our lives, and do we want a messy, undisciplined life, or do we want one that has some progress and some motion along the ways you want, along the path with the guardrails? Here's what I think discipline is. You ready for it?
I am.
The right small steps taken on purpose, they bring great freedom. I just think it's in three parts. The right small steps taken on purpose bring great freedom. And that's the pathway and the guardrails all in one. And the small steps of discipline that we take on purpose, the result of these is freedom in life. So I think, and by the way, this isn't the only thing that leads to a life of flourishing, right?
Sure.
Like gratitude or humility or settling in your mind what is right and wrong. Like that's a pretty important one that leads to flourishing or avoids it. And then understanding and living into forgiveness when you need to extend it or you need to seek it. But I think all of these together, discipline with gratitude, with humility, with right and wrong, with forgiveness, all of that kind of combine for a pathway in your life that has just been smoothed out a great deal, and the guardrails in your life that protect you. But today we're not going to hit all of those. We're going to hit discipline, the right small steps taken on purpose that bring great freedom.
In the same vein, I remember, a couple of years ago, I first heard him and I read a couple of his books. There's a Navy SEAL named Jocko Willink who famously had penned the line, "Discipline brings freedom." Yeah. And again, he attaches it on everything he can. He's like, look, everybody wants to be free, but there's a cost to it, and everybody has to pay it.
Yeah.
And it's the discipline now that will bring you the freedom then. And I remember it's like, I applied, like that is one of those things where I was like, yeah, that's right. Let's go ahead. Like, I mean, again, the cool thing is that really applies into everything. I mean, the personal spiritual disciplines now that allow us to have more freedom in our walk with the Lord, like now and then also later. The financial discipline, again, I'm applying, I know where we're going, but the financial discipline now that gives us financial freedom later, on and on and on.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I love that idea.
Well, and I think what you're actually introducing now is the first of them, is the small steps. And I should probably have listened to Jocko because I didn't know, but here we are on the same path of the small steps bringing great freedom. But I love it because what I love about a life of discipline is it's not that you have to go out and climb Mount Everest. It's not a great feat of strength, or, by the way, we're recording this on the 23rd, which is Festivus, feats of strength and airing of the grievances. But it's like a life that matters, and a life of freedom doesn't come by overcoming tremendous odds and climbing, Mount Everest, or swimming the English Channel, or whatever it is that you got to do. It's not a giant leap of an epic adventure. And there's place for that in life. I mean, that's part of what makes life worth living, is the sense in a human to pursue something. But what we're talking about, the great freedom that comes from very small steps. And like you just said, it's not that the freedom necessarily is unlocked today like open sesame, or you're rubbing the lamp and now there's the genie. It's that it gets you on the path of where freedom lives and resides. I'm going to give you a super simple example. Small step. What is a small step? Put 2 cookies on the plate instead of bringing the whole can of cookies to the table. So for me, I'm just, that's just where I live. I would end up eating 6 or 7 cookies if it's on the table and it's after dinner and we're sitting there talking. But if you put 2 cookies on a little plate for me, I'll eat the 2.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. So, I mean, I don't get diabetes on day 1, but 365 days in a row of an extra 5 or 6 cookies, that's not a good thing.
Well, and I think those, like, understanding those small steps makes all the difference. Like, it really does. Like, I get made fun of all the time, like I did earlier today, everyone, because I learned a long time ago, a small step towards the direction I want to go. I learned this about me, is I can say no, but I can't say stop. So when the sweets come in, I can say no, but if I'm going to have 1, it's going to end up being 5, because the truth is I'm just a glutton, like, in the best ways, but
and that's why you put the 2 cookies on the table instead of the jar. Yeah.
I'm just curious for you, like, how many people do you think get the weight of that? The majority of I think the big places that we go to, or the big things that we want in our lives, are achieved not by massive jumps, or 1 big jump or 2 big jumps, but a whole bunch of little steps. I mean, do you find that to be a prevalent thing?
So I think, let me see if I can remember 2 thoughts as we're talking. I think one thing that works against us is the lottery mindset, or the big payout lawsuit mindset that makes for great television and terrible living.
Yeah.
So we just bop along thinking we can do our own thing, and there's going to be some, great coming where we win the lottery, win a lawsuit, we gain an inheritance, and we think, see, now my ship has come in.
Yeah.
Now, as a driver of, like, the idea of reward for some work, like you're working hard, so your ship comes in, that's one thing. But if you're just thinking, I can do what I want now and let the rest take care later, and probably something great will happen, that's not very helpful.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is, do we think people get it? Like you asked. I think people get it in their head, but not in their heart.
Okay.
I mean, which is why we're kind of talking about this, because we're not going to tell you anything, tell everyone anything that's brand new or rocket science. It's just that from what we understand to our decisions to live, and that's what I mean by heart, the core, not our emotions, but the core of who we are. I just think making those decisions, it just takes discipline.
Yeah. And I mean, and so, because I agree, like sometimes I'll speak for me, is I just have found the small steps are not nearly as sexy as the big ones.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, even if you jump to sports, it's like everybody loves the walk-off home run. Everybody loves the final PK shot that wins it, the Hail Mary throw. It's like the big thing that saves the day. Like we all love that. Like just
on
as you were
ESPN's
saying,
top 10.
absolutely. But you know what never makes it? The guy who bunts the runner over to second and then the base hit that scores him. Like
Right.
the guy who bunts never makes it.
Yep.
But he's integral to that. It's like, usually linemen in the pull block, the things that they never make it. Why? Because it's the Hail Mary pass, like of course, or the big catch. Like I get it.
Yeah.
But man, like I remember a while back hearing somebody, the way that they framed this for whatever reason just made sense to me. And it was this idea of mountains built by layers of paint. That with enough layers of paint, thin layers of paint, you can build a mountain. And it was like, we want to just push everything and we want it to be as big as possible, as fast as possible. But one layer of faithfulness at a time, and all of a sudden you can watch a mountain grow. And it was like, that one clicked for me.
Yeah.
And so that was so helpful. This is really good.
And that's why it's small steps. Like I think that's like if everyone could realize as we grow into it, as we start leaning into this, that man, it's just do the next right thing, and it might not be huge. Like go change the oil in your car will thank you. Your family will too when the engine doesn't seize.
Yeah.
Or put $25 a month away. That's not going to do anything. No, it's not going to do anything, but you'll be surprised in 20 years what happens, because what happens is when you get a bit of an increase, that $25 becomes $35 or $50 or $100 or $200. And now pretty soon you're putting away thousands of dollars a year, and it's growing and it's compounding. And that's where this little step of discipline of $25 a month that really isn't going to keep me in retirement, but it's the habit that it develops, a small step that actually becomes a habit. So I think it's helpful. Yeah. So discipline, first part of it, the phrase is the right small steps taken on purpose bring great freedom. So the right small steps. Yeah. Just small steps. Just start with right things. And we'll talk about them in a second, but it's the next part that's really important. Taken on purpose. The right small steps taken on purpose bring great freedom. So this middle section of taken on purpose, this is where we get to the internal intentionality, the inner drive to do the right things now, which will bring a better outcome later than if we failed to do them. Like, frankly, if I go ahead and have 5 or 6 or 7 cookies today, it's not a big deal. Like I don't have to feel like a failure.
Yeah.
I just have 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 cookies, and I probably should have stopped at 2. I mean, this is becoming a silly example, but the reality is, it's not that it's just the steps, it's the inner drive. What's making me not want to stop? And if I would just close off that, if I would close off that doorway to have the opportunity to eat the 7 that I can't stop and just put the 2 on the plate, that gives me that but it's that I'm taking control of my future by saying, I'm going to get a plate out, put what I should have and can enjoy on the plate, take it to the table, put the rest back in the pantry. That's discipline. That's an internal intentionality. It's saying I'm in the right way under the Lord. I'm going to be in charge here. Yeah. I'm not going to let my appetite be in charge. I think that's part of what this means. This taken on purpose. It's the opposite of messy, undisciplined following your whims. I mean, whims, emotions, appetites, lusts, impulses, all these words, they're things that just come on us. And if we act out of them, you just have to do it a few times to realize, 8 out of 10 times you're not coming out with great outcomes.
Yeah.
But the impulses, the appetites, the emotions, the lusts, they still come. They still come. So if you have a desired outcome in life, well, then give thought to your decisions so that you can take them on purpose, so that you're not living at the whim of your emotions or appetites.
I'm curious what you think. So, in that, again, same vein, I've found that many of us, so again, I'll speak for me here, I find that I usually think that I am a proactive and rational person, but far often I'm more reactive and a little emotional on some things. And so I'm curious, like, I think for many of us, in reality, we are far more reactive than we think that we are. Like, we think we can walk through any situation and any time. We get the cookies and like, well, I can't do that because I have a calorie count. And then, how will this affect this, and this? It's like, no, I just want the cookie. Like, I'm tired. Give me 3 cookies and I'll go. Like, and I think we need to always remind ourselves, it's like when we, like, it's back to the guardrails and pathway part. Like it's good to have guardrails because we are very reactionary people.
Yeah.
On the whole.
Yeah, I think you're right. I really do. I think we're reactionary, and we're reacting on many levels in our lives. We're reacting against any past experiences or past hurts or past shaming. We're reacting to the peer pressure in our midst, in our right where we are, and we're reacting to our internal whims or appetites. And all these things are going on at all the same time. So discipline helps us. It might not enable us to handle, whatever reaction against past shame, but it sure can help us with whatever's driving us internally. And if I know I'm not going to be a slave to peer pressure, well, then I can just go ahead and live by discipline. And if I'm not going to be worried about the whims, that if I'm going to be able to control the whims, that's a disciplined life.
Yeah.
One of the great basketball coaches, I hate to say his name on here because, every time you do, you lose the last 7 viewers we have. But I heard him telling his team once, it's not the will to win that brings success. It's the will to prepare to win. And I thought that's it. That's the discipline. It's not enough when you get in the game to push to win the game. You have to drive to do all the right things in practice, in the gym, in the cafeteria, in the classroom, in the background, in the anonymity of the unaccountable. And that's what allows you to push on the court in the game.
All right, so discipline, just as you were saying, is the right small step. So taking the right steps in the right direction, the right small steps taken on purpose, does what?
Well, it brings great freedom. And I think this is also what we all want is a richer life, a fuller life, a freer life. And discipline, i.e. the small steps taken on purpose, gives us a richer, freer, fuller life because we're living from the inside out. We're not living from pressures on us. We're living from the internal sense of direction, not by our impulses or appetites. We're living on the pathway with the guardrails. And 99% of the time, it leads us to better decisions.
Yeah.
Now, what freedom means for you and for me in our lives may have a little bit of fluidity because I'm not saying you aim to live a disciplined life so that you will be rich, because who cares about riches? But a disciplined life leads to financial freedom, which isn't riches, but it's using the tool well. And that's what freedom is. You're not free as a carpenter if you're trying to make your hammer into a screwdriver. But the carpenter is free when he's using all the tools right. So a disciplined life has freedom because now you're financially free because you've used that tool right, or you've maybe eaten better, and so you can't guarantee you won't get sick, but you can reduce the likelihood of diabetes or of heart disease or certainly obesity by the disciplined choices. So freedom is going to end up meaning different things, but you're just going to have a richer, fuller life, freer life with fewer avoidable impositions on it. So I think that's what the great freedom, that's where it leads us.
It's really good.
Ugly interruptions, you just can mitigate those.
It's really good. The right small steps. I mean, it's just a good reminder. Like, you can't just take any steps to get to where you're going, but the right ones. And they're often small, taken on purpose. We never fall into disciplined steps.
I mean, that's the truth. I thought I could.
Yeah, I would love
you can't charm your way into a disciplined life.
It's true. And it brings great freedom. Okay, so let's try to get practical here.
All right.
Like, where do we need to apply this? So, let's say, beginning of the year, where do I need to start?
Well, we've already been talking about eating. Let me offer, Ben, you jump in here with
Sure.
something on eating, because I do not mean to make eating too much, but I just think probably 95% of us, 85% of the time, could think better about how we eat. And I don't mean that we all have to have hard bodies and chiseled abs and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm just meaning according to the maker specifications.
Yeah.
So what do you, like when you, Ben, because you're a little bit younger than me. You're a little bit healthier than me. You're a little bit.
I mean, at least a couple decades
more cognizant of stuff. What do you think of when eating? Like how without being so much that I can't do that. I'm a busy parent on the run. Like I mean, we're not trying to be. But how do you say? Oh, here's 2 things I would help people change, or something like that.
Well, you tell me when to stop. This is actually like one of those things that I am fairly.
We got Will laughing behind the camera.
Like I'm fairly passionate about, and it's happened over the last like probably 6 or 7 years because I've just simply watched this, I think, decimate and do a lot of damage to families and to people. Like again, so I think number one is figuring out what in the world, like health wise, like what the right goal is. You know, like I was actually thinking about this during your sermon yesterday. Like, you know, not eating, but like, again, like you can hit a bullseye, but if it's the wrong bullseye, it's still sin because sin is missing the mark, right? But if you could bullseye any other mark, but you've missed the one that matters, then it's still sin, like, and you've missed it. So I think making sure that we're trying to aim after the right target when it comes to food, when it comes to health, is one of the biggest things. And I think this is actually, and again, I'm in student ministry, so like this is where social media gets a lot of our students in a lot of trouble.
Right.
When it's like the top tier of genetics and, you know, extracurriculars help a lot and making you look that way. And it's like when that's the model, and steroid and all of it, right? Again, because that's their job is what they look like. Now, the reality is that's not, most of our jobs is not completely what we look like. Like what's the difference?
So how would you, what's a suggestion?
Well, one I think is figuring out what is healthy for you. Is in having a good target to go for. I think is a very helpful thing. I mean, yeah, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I do think that's good. I think not comparing myself to the people whose job it is to look good is also a very helpful second one. So what's my lane? And I don't have to be in their lane. I think that's really good.
Yeah. I mean, like how specific do you want to go? Like, I think, I mean, just as like you've written, if we've talked about, like there are always foods that, again, like we never need to demonize any food. Every like, you know, everything's fine in moderation. I think when the classic quote unquote processed American diet becomes something that is like the standard by which you always live by, like I think that's where we start getting in trouble. Like again, like weight is not a bad thing. Like it's okay to be, you know, you don't, again, it's not chiseled abs is the line, but we do want to be people who are marked by health. Like I think that honors the Lord in everything that we can. Like one of the things that I got pretty passionate about was this idea of just like longevity in general. And longevity usually, like if you think of it from this terms of, there's a guy named Dr. Peter Attia, who breaks down longevity into 2 factors, basically the length of life that you have and the quality of life that you have. Because if you only have one of those, great, you lived a long time, but you never could do anything. Or you lived like really well for 10 years and then that's it. Right. Like I think having our thought and like seeing that food is the fuel for our body. And we actually really do begin to look like and we feel like what we put into our bodies. Like it makes all the difference.
Well, it's amazing how every time you go to the gas station, you have to make sure you're not putting diesel into your car.
Yeah.
And you have to know that it's 10% ethanol, or you go to the special one with pure gasoline. And we don't think of that with our mouths. Yeah. It's the fuel cap every time you open the mouth, and people are putting diesel into a car that should take unleaded.
Yeah.
You know, like we just got to be thoughtful about it. So that's one of those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think what you said a minute ago, processed foods, factory foods, I think a great thing for all of us to consider is, how can I cut down on processed? How can I cut down on factory? How can I increase fresh?
Yeah.
And that's not, I mean, I know it's cheaper to buy processed foods. So one of the things about poverty is that it's just easier and cheaper to get calories that are processed as opposed to fresh fruit, fresh meat, fresh eggs, that kind of stuff. At the same time, for the most of us who aren't in the poorest of the poor, and if you're listening to the podcast, you're probably not in the poorest of the poor. How can we have more fresh, less factory? Yeah. I mean, there's just a simple line that can help determine some discipline.
Yeah. I usually think a good thing to do is there's this great study, again, in separate studies that looked at what were some key markers of really healthy children. And so they weren't just like, so one was looking at pure physicality and like their like actual physical health. And another one was looking at emotional health and like how, like, and so there was one that they were looking at like religious, like all that stuff. And one of the key markers for both, for physically healthy children as well as emotionally healthy children, was something very simple, and it was having meals together as a family.
Amen.
It's one of the clearest indicators of like how well a child was going to grow into like good values in general, but also good health.
Yeah.
Because usually most people who sit down together and have conversations at the table are also not just, smacking Taco Bell every single night, but there's usually cooked meals involved as well. Not that Taco Bell's
and
bad.
Well, what it does is if there's cooked meals prepared from ingredients and so forth, it allows for the Taco Bell and the Chick-fil-A and the whatever else is. Like it just, but if that's the whole thing, then we're in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah.
All right, well, we've done eating a lot. I think we've given people enough to say, that's right.
Yeah.
How can I take the right steps taken on purpose to bring a little more freedom there? Let's move on, and we probably won't spend as much time in some of these because I knew I saw your eyes light up. I thought, he's going to go everywhere. How about time with God? I mean, I think people could have a new, like by the end of the year, you could have a new understanding if you thought differently about time with God and were intentional about it. Like it is a relationship. And I think a lot of us, it's hard to relate to the God of the universe because also it's easy to relate. Well, it's semi-easy to relate to you, Ben, because you're sitting across the table from me. But even so, we have to work at it well, let me listen to him all the way through and let me understand what he's saying and let me interact and so on and so forth. It's hard with God because he's not across the table from you. But how do we grow into being with God, relating with God? Well, all right. And then how do we latch that into discipline, small steps taken on purpose? Oh, I know. What's your small step taken on purpose for reading scripture this year, dwelling in it or memorizing it? I mean, my cousin just memorized over the last few years, memorized the whole New Testament, 7,900 verses. Like that's crazy. I'm not saying we all need to, but what if I memorized a verse a month? That's 12. That's not a bad thing. Or a verse a week, that's 50. I don't know. What if you said, I'm really going to get to know Isaiah this year, and I'll just read it front to back and study a few things and back to front and read it again. I don't know. What's your small step taken on purpose that's going to bring you greater freedom? Because I tell you what, if you make Isaiah your home, you're going to know more of God than ever.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think when you think time with God, or how can we be helpful here?
So again, this is often for me, but maybe somebody else needs to hear this as well, is that we will never understand the impact of one step of faithfulness. And so whether that's just simply sitting down and reading that verse, even though you've only got 5 minutes, the Lord can show up more in 5 minutes than you could ever possibly imagine that he could. And so it's like, just do it. Yeah. And the same is true for the sins that we are, struggling with, that we go, I've just always had this, and it's really not affecting anything. It's not that big of a deal. Or there's that one thing that maybe it's not even a sin, but we feel like the Lord's inviting us to try it or inviting us to do it. And it's like, but what about all these things? And it's not going to it's not going to help anything, and it's not hurting that. It's like, no. We will never understand the impact of one step of faithfulness. Yeah. We don't know what we're missing out on, and we don't know who is missing out on us taking that step.
Mm-hmm.
That's
good.
Yeah.
That's so good. And I've heard you again and again share that with our students and invite them, almost like we were saying a minute ago with, will $25 a month saved for retirement really make a difference? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
When you spend 5 minutes with the Lord, and then pretty soon it becomes 6 minutes and 8 minutes, and you don't notice, and 10 and 20, and he's just got a hold of your heart more. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, let's keep working down the list, because eating, time with God? What are small steps that we can take on purpose? And there's a million more in each of these. I mean, we didn't even talk about prayer, but I'm telling you, maybe this is the year you have a prayer list in a different way than you ever did before. And we should maybe do one on prayer in the new year.
Yeah.
All the different lists. We've done that. How about your activity? Like which is kind of activity and schedule all together, but what your lifestyle is, what your, this is different than eating, but I'm just thinking of sleep. I'm thinking of sweating.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of family time. Like, how about each of these things? I mean, when you start making the decisions, you're purposely getting on the right pathway. That's what God's leading you to. If you're letting sleep escape you, I mean, how much sleep does someone need? Well, each of us is a little bit different. But if you're just letting sleep escape you, or if you're sleeping too much, aka teenagers, no, actually, probably not. Actually, studies show they're not getting enough sleep. They need to be sleeping more, screens less at midnight.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. But I'm just telling you, God renews us as we sleep. You have trouble sleeping. How are you being disciplined? I.e., how are you taking the right steps on purpose to power down in the evenings? Like it's up to you to figure that out. There probably are best practices and you can Google them, but I'm not, it's not our job to do that. But hey, if you want a disciplined life, what does that look like? What do you think when you think of an activity, lifestyle, schedule type side of it, Ben? I mean, I jumped onto sleep.
Well, I mean, let me say this about sleep is I completely agree. The one book that I've read on sleep that makes me an expert, it suggested 7 to 9 hours. And here's one of the other things and why I actually tell a bunch of students that getting your sleep schedule is one of the most important things really fast, is because when you're waking up at 6, that means you need to go to bed at 10. And you stay out of a whole lot of trouble when you're going to bed at 10 and waking up at 6.
Well, that's a good point.
Because my dad used to always tell me, nothing good happens after midnight. So that saves you from that. I think all of those categories of like the fun, active things that you can do in your life, maybe, and like the beauty is it's a choose your own adventure. Like you get to decide what is good for you. Some people, they love a weight room and some people don't. And some people love just the road and themselves with their headphones in, and they'll just go for a jog. And some people like me don't. Some people love, something with a ball, like racquetball or golf or tennis or whatever it is. I think having something that gets your heart rate up, that gets you out there moving and going. Like, here's the way I always frame it. Because it's, again, like we often kind of put these things into athlete or like I need to lose weight or that kind of stuff. And it's like, I try to frame things in, did Jesus juke everybody? A little bit more biblical terms, which is like from the foundation of creation, God has given us the calling to be stewards. Mm-hmm. And we are very marked as being embodied people.
Yeah.
And so we need to take care of the physicality that God has given us and be good stewards of it. But it's not just that, it's also the time and the community. And the beauty is when you get to work out with a friend, when you get to go play pickleball with buddies or go run with a group, like we end up hitting multiple things. And so I think just having that as an outlet and everything.
Or as an introvert time.
Yeah.
Like go for a bike.
It's a good point too.
Or walk or run just because you're on your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love how I came from an introvert and you're like, and then there's the extrovert perspective.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, for the extroverts among us, AKA me, sometimes the run is exactly what I need just to be alone.
You're running to the next group to talk to.
Well, that's true. And I always run faster when I pass people or when I see people on the street. Yeah. No, that's true. I think our bodies are made not only to sleep, but also to sweat.
Yeah.
And I think if we think, how am I sleeping? How am I sweating? That we're going to get there. We're going to get a lot what we need to do. All right, let's move on. So to finances. If you love eating, I love finances. Like you've done a lot of study on eating and stuff. And so we spent a lot of time there. This has been one of my burdens for 30 years is to help people use this tool better. I mean, as even when I was in the business world, I was like, I think we just, and I did a business degree. And I remember my friend saying to me, one of the reasons it feels so dark spiritually in the business school sometimes is because the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. And I didn't, I'm not nearly as spiritually sensitive as most of the people around me, but when she said that, I'm like, boy, that's a good point. And of course, a lot of people doing business, especially we were doing finance. What is finance? It's all about money and getting more money. And that feels a lot like, to a lot of people, the love of money or greed. And I have been in that lane and not. And to use it as tools, as a tool is a wonderful freedom. But actually, just like there's a right amount of sleep to get for your body, there's a right amount of sweat to do for your body, there's the right type of calories or the right types of food to ingest for your body. There are simple principles with finances that lead you in ways that give freedom. I mean, that's what we're talking about. Simple steps taken from within. So, I mean, it's just as simple as, do you even know what comes in and what goes out?
Yeah.
That's one discipline. That's one step of discipline that can lead you to freedom, because if you don't know, you can't live in what's going on because you're not in reality. It's a fog. It's a mist. And we've all been there. I mean, it happens. And then do you have a set of steps that you work through each month or each payday or each week? I mean, just jotting them down on the back of an envelope like Abraham Lincoln going to Gettysburg. You can solve it for the rest of your life. Oh yeah, that's right. Every payday I do these 5 things. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. And do you then you get to what are you going to do with the money that comes in? Do you give to the Lord the first fruits? Or do you kind of wait until the end of the year and feel guilty?
Yeah.
Do you pay yourself first, which is one of the principles financial managers give you? So obviously after you've given the Lord the first fruits and the rest is yours, quote unquote yours, I mean, it's all his, but do you pay yourself first? That's the first step to freedom. And you say, oh, but I can't even make rent and we barely have groceries. Right, I get it. But the second you have a little bit extra, what do you do with it? Do you put it away for the rainy day or the day of need, the emergency fund? I mean, that's paying yourself first. Anyway, those kinds of things. And I would say this, married couples in finances, I mean, Ben, I'm just talking here. I'm sorry. Oh. I'm just saying married people, if you're married people, married couples, figure it out together. When I always counsel, I think we both do, when we're counseling premaritally, have all the money decisions in the first month of your marriage, second month, third month, have them on the way into your marriage. Don't think of each other like roommates where you split up the bills and split up the income. Do all that work to combine it. Why? Because it's growing you together as you figure out how to come together from some disagreements or different perspectives, and don't continue with 2 sets of books and 2 sets of incomes, and make it one so that you become more one in doing that. That's a hard thing. I mean, it's not easy, but, and maybe you're 15 years in your marriage said, I've never even thought of that. Start thinking about that, pray about it, and see how God would do that. These are some things on small steps that bring great freedom, small steps taken on purpose that bring great freedom. My favorite line in Proverbs 31 about the Proverbs 31 woman, Ben, you need to be a Proverbs 31 woman.
I got the legs for it.
But, it's when they say she can laugh at tomorrow. And that's the opposite of what many people have, is they're afraid of tomorrow. What does it mean she can laugh at tomorrow? Well, she's done all the planning. She's got all the margin. She's built up a little bit of reserve for this, that, and the next day, and she's not afraid of what's coming. And in that context, it's in the financial thing. So I think that's, if we can quote unquote laugh at tomorrow because we've been prudent, this is a great thing. We're using the tool the way God made it. Some ideas on finances. Ben, do you have anything to say about screens?
Yeah, I mean, I think we always need to be taking into account of how we're using screens. I mean,
I'm making you say this stuff.
Well, I'd be happy to do it. This is just where we are. Like, I mean, I think a couple places that you can quickly look at to take kind of that account of how you're using screens is right on your phone. You can look at the amount of time that you've spent on apps. Ooh. It's a little convicting. And again, like I actually mentioned this in another podcast, like it was super encouraging. Like, my wife, Janessa, like had started hiding apps so she wouldn't just naturally go to them and go spend 30 minutes doom scrolling on
by
them.
accident.
Yeah.
It's all by accident.
Yeah. And like, she's not like, oh, I need a kick on something. Like I need a hit. Like, let me go. It's just like, oh, I've got 5 minutes. So let me just see what's happening. And then 30 minutes later, we don't want that. And so that for her, that was an intentional step. Of course, I don't struggle with that. So I haven't done that. Or maybe it's just disobedience. We'll see. So figuring out your time spent, but also just what are you actually spending it on? Again, like the content that you're absorbing, the content you're taking, that really matters. I mean, some of those things give you life and some of them don't. Like, again, there's a reason why the news is what the news is in some ways. And so I'm of the perspective, I think sometimes less is more on that. But everyone has to choose where they are. And so being around content that doesn't, I think, make you more reactionary is always a good thing. But also content that isn't addictive is a good thing. Like personally, like I just have to be careful with what I turn on because I can say no, but I can't always say stop. And so that one episode of MASH or whatever it is, that 80s show or whatever, that I'm like, I'll just watch one. We've all said it. And then the season, like the 10 episode, 1 hour long each episode season is now finished and you finished it in one night. And now you're going to bed at 3 a.m. It's like, well, what happened? Oh, I binge watched.
Right.
And so I think we just always need to be looking at what amount of time are we spending? What's the content that we're absorbing? And then what in the world do we do to help protect ourselves? And I think just putting limits on ourselves, like those guardrails, that discipline. Like I always think like if, and the Lord's taught me this over a long period of time with like wrestling with my own sins and difficulties and disciplines and all that stuff. It's like, if you want something bad enough, set up like the plan to succeed, like have a plan. And you can, like he can beat anything through you, like when you're willing to just go, Lord, like help me here. Even doom scrolling, even binge watching, even the app we can fall into and get addicted to, or the shows or the movies or whatever it is. So I think we just need to be careful how much time we're spending on screens because it takes away from that time that you could be doing something else.
Right.
Again, that time on the screens is not a bad thing, but it's like the fancy dinner. It's like the nice fake, like you can do some if you can manage that, but you can't do it every single night or every single other weekend.
Right. I mean, somebody asked Andy Stanley, was it you telling me this? Somebody asked Andy Stanley, how did you write 27 books? And he said, well, I wrote them while you were watching TV. And I'm like, that was so convicting. Yeah. Because that's, whether it's television or doom scrolling or whatever, it just is. Or news, cycling through 4 news. Yeah. I would say another one on screens is gambling.
Okay.
I think we are in a dangerous place because sports betting is everywhere and it's so accessible. Like I don't even have to go to the horse track anymore.
Yeah.
And I just think that accessibility of it is what, and then so it's not just gambling, but I mean, obviously we had this conversation like 25 years ago about porn. Now it's gambling. How do we help people out of the ditches and the ruts? And I don't know all the answers, but I just think the availability, accessibility, the way that they've perfected the algorithms to keep us hooked, and our phones are all hooked into our bank accounts and our credit cards. We're about to watch a blow up of disasters in families.
Yeah, it's always that famous
because
line.
it's discipline. We're talking about discipline.
Yeah. Where it's like, if they're not charging for a product, you're the product, like kind of thing. And it's like, this was helpful. I read a good bit on, social media and like, the majority of social media things, the majority of gambling things, like, and by majority, I mean, sports betting, all of them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like they're getting their playbook from casinos. Like that's just where they're getting it. It's why it's a game. It's why they do certain things. Like it's meant to keep you addicted. Like again, we can play with those, but we have to have it in a disciplined way and know what we're getting into. Anyways,
we got to be super, super careful. Okay. So maybe just a couple more super practical things. Nobody has, marriage, relationship with your spouse. An undisciplined marriage isn't a great thing. Again, we're when you stop to think about it, if everybody's always running, if you're like ships passing in the night and roommates and you barely ever stop to talk to each other, you're grabbing dinner on the go, you got to get the kids here, you got to get the kids there, and we're prioritizing. And then when we do need a little time, we take some me time. I need some me time. Well, we do need me time. You're exactly right. We also need us time. We need to have the time to sit on the couch together at night or in the morning or go for a walk or coffee or whatever it is, praying together. I'm telling you and what we do is when we're super undisciplined or busy and everything, and life happens. I mean, we all get this, but what we do is we go on a bigger vacation to cover over, and we call that quality time. Well, quality time is quantity time as well. So all of this just to say, how do small steps taken on purpose in your marriage lead to greater freedom? Well, how can we agree together how you're going to take time for each other in a day, to look in each other's eyes every day or attend to each other, touch each other? If you go a day without touching, this is why when you go into can I just say this on the side? When you go into a memory care unit or an old folks home, hug the people as far as it's appropriate, because human touch we need. Well, if we're with our spouse and we're never hugging or holding hands or arm on the shoulder, we need to do this. These small decisions or small acts of intimacy that say, oh, you're mine. I'm yours. This is a really good thing. We got to talk together how to lean into our relationship with our spouse. But it's small steps. It's just small steps. Pathway, guardrail, taken on purpose.
Really good.
All right. Well, do we have time for one more or two more, Ben?
Okay, let's do one more. Which you get to pick though.
How about our sense of purpose?
Okay.
How about Jimbo always says it, aim at nothing, you hit it every time.
Yeah.
So 2025, we can just let the calendar lead us and we'll just aim at nothing and we'll just get up the next day and do it all again. Or we can say, you know what? The right small steps taken on purpose bring great freedom. How can I say, Lord, you tell me what you want me to do this year? Somebody, yesterday at church, so we're recording this on the 23rd, Festivus, of course. Yesterday at church, somebody said, you know what? My word for 2025 is abide, and the text is John 15, because I'd quoted that in the message. This woman is doing what she can to, she's got her word and her passage that she has already sensed from the Lord. He's going to meet her in and use, to grow her. And it's 10 days before the end of the year. I'm like, this woman is awesome. And she's living on purpose.
Yeah. How
can we live on purpose? How can we think through and say, Lord, you keep steering me like a moving ship can be steered. I'm just going to keep taking the next step. You steer me. I think there's some discipline there to say, let me spend a little time with the Lord and then let me keep coming back to that through the year. How am I living into what you've given me for this year?
It's really good. Because I think we, from time to time, can romanticize these kind of things. Like that, the right thing just hits and everything. Where it's like, like you mentioned, like a little bit back, like that whole lottery mentality of like that one thing's going to click. I remember hearing this pretty cool quote from an English author named Somerset Maugham, who basically was in an interview, got asked like, do you wait for inspiration to hit, and wait for it? He goes, yes, but fortunately for me, she arrives every morning at 9 sharp. And it was like the idea of like that discipline just to start, and that discipline is like, yes, it's so romantic and so great to come up with the plays and the novels and whatever it is that we want. And we feel like that purpose is, but it begins by sitting down with pen and paper. It begins with taking the right step wherever we are with whatever it is. And we can do that with one small step, the right small step taken on purpose, because it brings great freedom.
Yeah. I think back to high school for me. Here's a little story at the end.
Yeah.
Speaking of a disciplined life versus an undisciplined life, which is filled with procrastination, putting things off, filled with making choices that are suboptimal.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily sinful, but they are suboptimal. I think back to high school, and I had an allergic reaction to homework.
Okay.
I just didn't want to do homework, and I didn't think I needed to do homework. And I was a very good listener in class, note taker. I tested well, so I got a lot right in class, and I got a whole lot wrong at home. But as I look back, here's what I know. I put more energy into avoiding homework, feeling guilty about homework, finding other things to do. If I would have sat down, opened the math textbook, and did the 20 problems, it probably would have taken me 30 minutes. I know I will have spent an hour dreading it, avoiding it, putting it off.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
And those big projects that and then I couldn't sleep and it's due the next day and 50% of your grade and I barely had started on it and I, up at 6 a.m. trying to cobble something together. And this is just stupid at the end of the day. Like if I would have just chipped away at it, I would have been fine. But undisciplined life, it actually, I think, as I look back on the parts of my life in the past and then even possibly today probably that are undisciplined, you're like, man, sometimes that takes more energy. It certainly takes more energy to get out of the problems you cause.
Yeah.
So you probably don't have anything to do with that. You, you're
well, as someone who can from time to time be a bit of a perfectionist, it was like in the same vein, it's like perfectionism is just, procrastination masquerading as quality control and all that stuff. So I agree with you.
Well, I don't know about that, but anyway, so small steps taken on purpose bring great freedom. I think it's true. I definitely think it's true because I've seen it. I've seen myself grow from that kid in high school, even into college, where I was putting everything off to now just embracing what I need to do and watching the outcomes better than I could have imagined.
Yeah.
Because that's how God's wired it.
Amen.
Well,
Jason, thank you so much for this, man. I think this has been super helpful for me, just getting to discuss this. And again, really starting everything on the right step. It doesn't have to be a big step. It doesn't even have to be a medium step, but with enough small steps taken on purpose, that this year could be the year that we, maybe for the first time, or that we could maybe for the first time find that great freedom that we've been longing for in whatever vein it is. And so, friends, maybe this is just something that you needed to hear. Maybe it's something that you've got a friend who needs to hear, and you just need to encourage them with it. Would you please send this to a friend and just share the good news that with enough right small steps, when we take them on purpose, we can get that freedom that we're after. Thank you so much, guys. We'll see you next time.